funniest comedy. Mondays at 8, Kensington General Hospital is the scene for romance, humor, and bureaucratic mayhem. Then at 9,
we've got this in order now, have we?
Ride with New York's most hilarious cab drivers when Taxi returns. House Calls and Taxi, 2 #1 shows back this fall.
First of all, BCTV.
Coming up next, Webster.
When I was night news editor of Graphic on Fleet Street 34 years ago, 12 morning newspapers. Since then, they've been decimated, and look who is here.
Oh, Jack.
Brother Sandy.
Hi, Jack.
Brother Drew. And we all worked together in Fleet Street. How long ago for you, Sandy?
1947.
How long ago for you, Drew?
1950.
1950. Well,
Why don't we all stroll down here and go to my office and sit at the punch table and have a talk?
and have a talk at the punch table about the good old days. Jolly good show.
Yeah.
Okay, is this the place?
This is the place, boys.
Thank you very much.
In you come.
Let me just walk up and stop. There's not such a collection of bloody hams in my life.
That's it.
This is indeed an auspicious occasion. I have 2 brothers. I don't suppose we'd bet. This is indeed an auspicious occasion. I have 2 brothers. I don't suppose we've met more than 20 times in the past 40 or 50 years. Each of them a highly successful newspaper man. My brother Drew, who's London editor of a chain of newspapers, United Newspapers. My younger brother. My slightly elder brother, Sandy, who Fleet Street newspaper man and editor for many years of the Sunday Mail in Scotland. And would you believe it? He's now starting a new career on a talk show in a radio station in Scotland. Gentlemen, an auspicious occasion.
Did you say auspicious or suspicious?
Well, shall we make it auspiciously suspicious? But there was one time when I think all of us were working on Fleet Street at the same time, correct?
That's right. I was in the old News Chronicle in Bouverie Street. Where were you, Drew?
I was at the House of Commons working for another organisation.
And I was the night news editor of the old dreadful daily graphic sketch thing.
Yeah, I remember that.
Isn't it kind of sad about Fleet Street? Is it finished down the tube, gone forever?
Well, the jungle looks fiercer and worse than ever, but really the prospects are quite good. As your old friend Roy Thompson used to say,
Old friend be damned, but I know
trouble
what
with
you
Fleet
mean.
Street is that it's got too many newspapers. But the fact that in spite of all their difficulties, they all survive. The Mail, the Express, the Mirror, the Sun, a new paper called the Star, and then the heavies, the Guardian, the Telegraph, and the Times. It's quite fantastic. And the provincial press persists as well. But these days, the economic situation of the country means that all of us are in grave trouble. And as you know, Jack, across the road from this office stands the deserted building where, not so long ago, the London Evening News was published, one of the great London newspapers. And of course, when we were boys in Glasgow, there were 3 evening papers, the Times, News and Citizen. Not so long ago in London, there were 3 evening papers, the Star, News and Standard, and now there's one called the New Standard. It's rather sad.
Sandy, I think Brother Drew has been anglified and is a solid member of the
Wait a minute, get your syntax right. Anglicized.
Anglicized, anglified, and is a proper member of the establishment. I'm sure that when you come to tell me the death of the newspapers, you'll give me, and there have been many die, you'll give me a much more different reason.
I'll give you very different reasons. I'll give you the reasons I left journalism in 1974 at the young age of 59. We were taken over by a London mob, and the first thing they wanted to do was put nudies, what we call tit and bum, on page 3. I believe you call it T&A.
Correct.
That's right. Well, I wouldn't have it. I'm an old Calvinist. And I said, no, make me an offer I can't refuse. That paper has gone on from strength to strength. Nobody takes the slightest notice of me, but I still think I was right. Future newspapers, well, myself, now that I'm really a lay person, I get most of my information from radio or television.
Superficial, of course. You can't get the same depth as you can get from a good newspaper.
I don't know. I think that's just a slick remark. Some of the in-depth stuff we have on television is first class.
Well,
and on radio.
this was a very brave attempt by a very rich man to give the British public more depth and a high standard of colour photography. Alas, £6 million down the drain, the magazine is now ceased.
I could have told him at the start, you can't do it on a tight little island like ours. You can do it in North America and Canada, but you can't do it here. We have so much media coverage anyway. What's left for him?
I suppose so. But on the other hand, surely the truth of the collapse of the newspapers and the circulation is down to naught compared to what it was.
No, can I just reply to that by saying that in Scotland there's a brand new Sunday paper, the Daily Mail is about to publish a brand new Sunday paper, and the Sunday Express is coming into the market with a colour sup, and the News of the World is going to publish a colour sup. The thing is boiling away very well.
We've had all kinds of union jurisdictional troubles with VDTs and the rest of them. You had the same ones. Is it not a fact that your trade unions are really so archaic and your management so bad that many of them were forced under?
Unions are too strong, and that is especially true in Fleet Street, where extraordinary things happen on a Saturday night, where people turn up and go to sleep and don't work, and sign their expenses Mickey Mouse Sunset Boulevard.
That's right. And just by chance, I have my union card here, 1939. What a brave young man I was. And I was fully paid up, because I remember an occasion when my brother went with union card to cover a strike, and they said, let's see you. Yes, yes. Looked at the back for his contributions and said, you're out of benefit. Away you go. They wouldn't let him in.
What he's saying by out of benefit was that the shop steward and John Brown's and Clyde Bank said, show me a card. Your dues only paid up, I'm not going to talk to you. But that was a rugged society in these old days. I think we all did our share of picture snatching and rugged reporting, did we not, in the Glasgow in the 30s?
Yes, I have many pathetic memories of that. Going up an entry, a close, some wee boy had been burned to death, and you looked around, and on the sideboard there was a little picture, hand-coloured, of the victim, and you quietly put it in your pocket.
You'd left 5 bob and slipped out the room.
That's right. I didn't often leave 5 bob.
Being a little bit younger than you guys, I came into play really during the war, when we were distracted by other things, so I wasn't in the snatching business.
I got to tell my little story about taking the picture of the guy, stealing the picture off the wall. 3 heavy brothers came to get me. I sent to the art department for the picture, and it had been totally ruined by Indian ink. And I had to get Harold Bishop Dixon, a dreadful man, to give £5 to the family. Now, we had a good upbringing. You know, I got so angry the other day when one guy talked about our 93 Battlefield Avenue. I said, I've been back shooting our routes, 93 Battlefield Avenue. He said, why would you want to take a picture of that to show everybody in Canada? Respond.
Well, it's a perfectly respectable house. I mean, he obviously thought it was some kind of a slum.
No, I'm talking about the kind of lifestyle we had when we were kids.
Perfectly good upbringing, yes.
Yes, we all had to work hard. Some of us had to go with milk in the morning, and I was rather a sensitive child, and I cried my way to the milk shop, whereas my brother, on the left, made a giant killing at Christmas with the tips.
New Year.
New Year. I knew he was going to be a millionaire.
Well, those were the good old days. I loved delivering milk in the morning and papers in the afternoon and having my little private rake, as we used to say, of spare rolls out of the basket sold at a lesser price.
May I recall, for the benefit of our Canadian fans, and Sandy and I both have fans there,
This
is it not a
is.
fact that somebody rang you during a talk show and said, go home, Jack, stay Sandy?
That's right. I'm very proud of that.
And I love the lady in Vancouver who rang me twice in 10 years and said, Drew, you sound just like Ronald Coleman.
Ronald who?
But we were talking about something else, weren't we? We were talking about Glasgow.
Talking about reporting, we were talking about family.
Yeah.
Now, Each of you are both good talkers. I'm the wild colonial boy. Where did we get all this talking ability, this extrovertish attitude?
Well, I would think Grandpa Spot, who was a dapper little baker who drank too much, but was very good with the horses. And he used to have a lovely little moustache, wavy hair, brown boots, which killed him. He had bunions. So after he'd had his dinner or tea at night, he would take his boots off, take his socks off, get a basin of hot water, put into it a pearl button, and sit there and steep his feet. But he was a little show-off.
Why the pearl button?
Well, say it gave off something chemically.
I remember sitting on the arm of Grandpa Spot's chair at King's Park, listening to the distant sound of an Irish radio station giving the tips for the horses. And my job was to write down the tips so that you could go down the bookies in the morning.
Is it true about the night Grandpa Spot died?
Yes, it's quite true.
Cue Sandy.
Well, as the mist came over his eyes, he must have remembered that he had backed 3 dogs, dog racing, 3 dogs, in what we call a roll-up. If the first one wins, goes in the second. And he asked for his favourite paper, the Sunday Mail, to check whether he had won. He hadn't. He sighed and died.
A likely story.
Do you remember Grandpa Webster, the old man?
Yes, with the toupee, the transformation.
Do you remember him going out of the room looking perfectly well and young, and he would come back, and we, the 3 kids, would think, something wrong with Grandpa Webster, something wrong with Grandpa Webster, and he'd taken off his transformation.
That's right. Do you remember the little sign, the little thing on the wall? When the heart is young at sporty, life begins at 40.
Talking of signs, I remember a little cameo in our own house at Battlefield Avenue when, if guests were staying late, my father would obtain from the sideboard a large notice which said, "Please move." This was a notice that was in use in the engineering works for moving machinery. So he would put it up on the mantelpiece. On other occasions, he would retire behind the couch and pretend to begin to undress the bed.
Yes, but I have nice memories of Grandpa Webster because he was one of the pioneers. He went to Venezuela as a tin miner, and in the old days, when you came off the boat, the first thing they did to you was measure you for your coffin.
More. Now, what am I going to do after this break?
Shut up, Brother Jack. I'll be back. I'm the handsome, the cultured one, the sensitive one.
You'll be back when?
Right after this break. What are you laughing at?
The brothers Webster.
Left of through, left of frame, and a sandy right of frame.
Everybody knows what I'm doing.
The brothers Webster. We sound like a Russian novel.
I think we sound like the Marx Brothers.
Speak for yourself. Drew, the hole-in-the-wall bed, little story.
I wanted to say before we left the days of milk deliveries behind that I have fond memories of sleeping in the recess or hole-in-the-wall bed in the middle with you 2 guys, one on either side. And blissfully, I recall that you would get up early in the morning and go off and do your deliveries. But I also remember, and this is going to be the title of my book, and I claim the copyright for this, lads, that over the top of the blankets, we had a heavy overcoat. And the overcoat was very comfortable, except that if the coattails were apart, you got a bit of a draft round your legs. So the family cry was, and this will be the title of my book, "Close the coattails, Father."
Shut the coattails. Father was quite an extraordinary man himself, though, was he not? Willie Webster.
Yes, we have a funny story about it. He was a very gentle soul, and he was a gaffer, swore that none of us would ever be engineers because he was always locked out or unemployed. And during the war, he was in charge of a large number of women. I mean, the last war, not the war before the war. And one day, one of them had been sick and brought in her sick line. And Father looked at it and said, "Oh, yes, what's been wrong with you, miscarriage?"
Why did we all go into newspapers? Was it because you started first, or because
It was because
Mother wanted us not to go into the...
Well, Dad didn't want us to be engineers, and I wanted to be a journalist. That was the only thing I ever wanted to be. And my school teacher had been to university with Sir Robert Bruce Head to the Glasgow Herald, and that's how I got in.
You got in as an office boy.
I got in as a gummer. I took the tape as it came off the Creed machines, and sent it forward to the editorial. That was my beginning.
I followed and then you followed.
And I followed you at the Daily Mail in Glasgow, indeed, and I had the first job of bringing the coal in. What I wanted to say about the old dad was that I admired the fact that he was a precision engineer. And I'm surprised that none of us seems to have inherited that. My daughter has. What about your kids?
None of my kids.
My daughter Lynn can put together little bits and pieces and
Jack
repair
has,
things
and
like that.
Jack, who met our father, says on a number of occasions, near enough is no good enough.
Yes.
That's the way the old
That was the message he left behind. One thing I liked about him was that he always wore a bowler hat as a foreman, so that he was easily identifiable by the guy having a quick cigarette.
In Inveraray, Scotland, the other day, a man walks up to me and says, "You're Jack Webster." He was from Toronto, Canada. I said, "Yeah." He says, "I served my time with your father." Anywho, enough of the family stuff. We've been very lucky in many ways, all the lot of us. But what about this country today? North American wire services, American and Canadian reporters in the United Kingdom give us tales of unrelenting gloom. Britain's down a tube, index pensions, civil servants, nobody works, black economy, everybody's on the fiddle. Pick up, gentlemen.
We're going through a very, very tough time, and people don't know whether to say, "Carry on, Mrs. Thatcher," or "Pack it in, Mrs. Thatcher." But the one thing that we can be sure about is that she is not going to change her way. I've met her on a number of occasions, seen her at work in the House of Commons. She's the most fantastic, tough politician who never tires. She dominates the cabinet. She refers openly to the rebels in the cabinet as the wets. They present no problem to her at all. She's quite determined that this tough financial policy will eventually turn the country around. But at the moment, we're heading towards 3 million unemployed, and it's a very worrying state of affairs.
Your politics personally.
Well, we don't normally talk about that, but I am...
Feel free.
You could say that I'm typical of a kind of right-wing Labour Party person who had a great loyalty to people like Hugh Gaitskell, who is now very turned off by the fact that the good old Labour Party has gone so far to the left. Indeed, the emergence now of this new party, the Social Democrat Party, could break the mould of British politics. We won't know for a long time, but it could break the mould and present a whole new situation, especially if the Social Democrats have an alliance with the Liberal Party, who, after all, a few years ago, picked up 6 million votes in one election.
I always remember a piece you wrote, Sandy, in which you said, "I am," and you haven't got your English accent on this morning, which you do rather well, "I am an environmental socialist."
Now, I'm a cynic. I voted for Maggie Thatcher too, but I don't share the gloom and doom. I think this country's in not bad shape. We're shaking out a lot of our industries. We're grossly overmanned and so on. And I think the way ahead is good. We're still leaders in many inventive sides of industry. We've still got very fine workmen. I think we have a good future. And we have freedoms here which are envied the world over.
And yet the police seem to be demanding more powers. You've got race riots which horrify and shock people and...
Steady on. We've had one bad race
And you had
riot
one year
in
before in
Brixton,
Bristol.
and we had one in Bristol, and the roots of these lie very deep, and to some extent they lie in unemployment and poor housing. I mean, kids of all colours leave school nowadays and can't get jobs, and in a deprived area like Brixton, which is near where my home is, it's easy to see that a small spark can ignite a great bonfire. And indeed, on the occasion of the riot you're talking about, it all came about because some policemen in a motor car saw a black boy with blood coming from a wound in his head. They took him into the car with the idea of looking after him and taking him to hospital, and their action was misinterpreted and the bonfire took off.
Do I accept this rather calm?
Well, I don't know. I don't know anything about colour problems.
Do you live in Scotland?
We have none over the border. It's far too cold for anybody who wasn't born there.
Yeah, no racism in Britain, you're telling me? Surely there is an undercurrent of racism.
Couldn't say that. Mr. Powell, Mr. Enoch Powell, one-time cabinet minister, does have people who support his view that we've gone on a very wrong path, that the streets will flow with blood one day, and when we have a thing like the Brixton riots, he says, "I told you so." But Michael Foot, Margaret Thatcher, and David Steele and other leading politicians are working for a multiracial society, and I think it'll come off.
Scotland doesn't have the problems at all. Scotland does have the problems, narrowing into a little smidgen of it, Sandy.
Smidgen?
Little S-M-I-D-G-I-N.
How beautifully he spells.
Or as you would say, a wee tate.
A wee tate, yes.
Oh, what is this, Jack?
class society. Why do you still have a class society?
You have a class society in
We
North
only have the
America.
class of money.
Yeah, I know. Well,
We don't
that's
have the-
even worse.
We don't have the class
At
of
least
snobbery.
At least we've got good breeding here.
Good breeding? Do you mean to say that that kind of upper-class breeding is good breeding?
What kind of upper class breeding? I know some very nice toffs.
Really? Do you regard me as some bloody colonial, really?
I don't know how I regard you. I'd really be stuck for words.
I think that...
There is a class society in Britain. There's obvious pride and
It's
privilege.
disappearing fast,
Well,
Jack.
if I can get a word in, chaps, why don't you sit back and have a rest so that I can say something? There are fundamental things wrong with the country, and one of them is the class system, which is being too long to disappear. And it stems from the public schools, which I'd like to see abolished. It stems from the archaic way we run our affairs and still have a House of Lords. Mind you, and this brings us on to a little royal point, Jack.
Oh, yes.
Mind you, whenever people begin to talk about dismantling the House of Lords, other people throw up their hands in horror and say, don't touch it. The moment you tamper with the hereditary system, you're tampering with the royal family. And the royal family, as you will have gathered during your visit, is a very popular institution. I would say the Queen is the most popular member. Prince Charles and the Queen Mother are the two other top of the pops.
Oh, yeah, shy dye is just a fantastic success throughout the world, and you can see hundreds of girls with shy dye haircuts in London right now. But it's really quite a strange system you have indeed, is it not?
What do you mean a stranger? This is a result of hundreds and hundreds of years of history. This is what we're proud of.
It's only 100 years since the people of Britain got up off their knees and got the 14-year-olds and the 12-year-olds out of the mines. Is it not?
So what? In your great country, were there never anything like that happened?
Just the Bernard and Bernardo boys who came out and were treated like we slaves. That's the truth. Oh, well, let's get back to the family. You're both confident and happy about the entire...
Well, I'm starting a new career.
Do you want some advice?
Yeah. Get a crooked accountant.
Never be obnoxious, Sandy. Just be direct. And when people accuse you of being rude, say, I'm not being rude, I'm being brusque, and I'm editing the calls as I go.
And I've got some questions for you.
Question.
If I was an unemployed mechanic living in Sheffield today, would I be welcomed in Canada?
Canadians would welcome you. You would find it very difficult to get in unless you got more than 50 points. Our immigration policy towards the Brits is kind of tough at the moment, unfortunately. But it's a great country. And you're great brothers. And do give my love to all of the Websters everywhere. And this, of course, is Sandy, London editor of the United Newspaper. Drew, London editor of United Newspapers. The ineffable Sandy, starting a news career. And I'm Webster.
That was quite a session I had with my brothers in Fleet Street in the early part of the summer. I'm going to take some calls on our British trip this morning, but first I want you to meet a man whom I interviewed at that same table, the man who kind of owns the table. Very witty fellow. His name is Alan Coren, and he is the editor of the historic magazine, tough magazine, called Punch, After the Break. Sitting with... Newspapers may come and newspapers may go, magazines may flower and magazines disappear in London and in England, but Punch goes on forever. And today I'm sitting with the distinguished editor of Punch magazine, Alan Coren, and what I'm told is a primitive piece of furniture, covered with scars and initials, but it's a famous table.
Yes, it is. It's 140 years old, which is the age of the magazine. And the scars that it's covered with mirror the scars of all the writers and cartoonists who've had these things inflicted on them by the magazine down the years. It's engraved with their...
Yeah, all your famous literati.
Yeah, a lot of infamous ones and a lot of royals and distinguished members like Thurber and Sid Perelman, and a lot of Americans who drift over like Mark Twain and bang a chisel on the table to be remembered.
And Ronald Searle, whom I remembered as that wonderful cartoonist fellow.
Yes.
Who else?
He's still around. He's gone mad and he's in the south of France, but...
Otherwise,
around.
Why do you let the royals disfigure the table?
Well, I think it's because occasionally we run into trouble with the royals, because if you're operating a post-imperial magazine like ours, with the country in decline and shaking at every pore and joint, occasionally you have to say rather off-colour things about the royals. Not because you dislike them personally, because you think about the nature of the monarchy. And the easiest way is to come in and say, well, look, fill your face in the trough and give you a couple of glasses, bang your name on the table, put your picture on the wall. That can't be bad in exchange for a couple of unpleasant adjectives. We stay on good terms with them.
I mean, the likes of Phillips and whatnot don't really mind, do they? Or Charles.
They'll do anything for a square meal.
Is that so?
Yeah, things are tough.
How about Shy Di? Is Shy Di going to have her thing on her inscription on the table?
We might ask Di in. I don't think she can get the inscription on the table until she's queen, which I think my guess is about 70 years' time. But the table will still be here, and so will we.
Yeah, jolly good show. There's a big friend of mine on this table here, and he was so brutal, I believe you had to replace the panel. Who is it, and what did he do?
Muggeridge. I don't think he was brutal. I think he was nervous. I mean, he never carries responsibility well, Malcolm. He wasn't a good editor. Circulation collapsed under him. And I think he worried about taking on the first job in which he actually ran other people. He was a very good employee. He's a marvellous writer, he's a marvellous man, but he's bad at running organisations.
He's a born-again Christian now. Perhaps that's...
Is he? I haven't got the news this morning. I mean, he was a born-again Christian yesterday, but knowing Malcolm, he could be a diabolist by now.
But
Chief rabbi, indeed, of Fordingbridge.
Perhaps he turned to that very sound philosophy after the tension of being a political satirist, carving people into little pieces on punch.
Do you think it's guilt?
That's... do you suffer from guilt?
No. No, not at all. We never hammer people who can't take care of themselves, and most of them can, I find. Certainly politicians.
A delightful crack in this week's punch about, it's obviously Thatcher. Her ladyship must hurry up because she has to close 3 factories today.
Yeah, yeah.
How bad is it in Britain from your point of view? Is
wonderful. I mean, it's like the Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times. With satire and humour are bound to flourish when things are bad. Our sales always go up during a war. What we need is a good Third World War. We've probably got about 300,000. We could really do with that.
Everyone would have a jolly good satirical laugh.
Good laugh. I'm in favour of cruise missiles in East Anglia. That'll bang circulation up in the Shires.
I think we can go close on that one, and I think we'll find that Alan Coren, the editor of The Punch, perhaps regrets this one a little. It's 2 hunger strikers. One is very fat and the other has vanished. And the cut line says, well, how are our 2 hungry strikers this morning? There is only one. One has eaten the other.
See, now that is a sheer production problem. Our covers, because they're colour and the rest of the magazine is black and white, the covers go down 4 weeks early to bind in with the advertising. And we bought that joke just as a funny joke before the unfortunate Bobby Sands, who is now deceased, had started going off his food. At that time he was, a reasonable weight, looking quite cheerful in the mornings. Unfortunately, when the cover appeared, he had 2 days to go, and that was our issue for that week. Now, handy-dandy, what do you actually do if you're an editor? There was no way of stopping that, so I now have to respond to all the letters that come in, and I apologise to people who think it's in bad taste. I particularly apologise to the IRA who think it's in bad taste, and open their letters carefully. But my problem is that, as an editor, I really quite like having had a very topical cover that morning. So, while I recognise it's in bad taste, I also recognise that things that the IRA, and indeed everybody in Northern Ireland, get up to are far worse than that. And it's the function of a magazine like ours, anyhow, to comment satirically. This one came in by accident, I say, because of the timing, but I don't really apologise for it.
Q. Alan Coren on the incredible columns which have just come back to me on your takeoff and Idi Amin.
Oh, yes, the amazing man. Yes, I mean, he was really a case in point. I had real problems there. I started the column, oh God, it must be 1973. And I had the 2 typical sets of opposition from readers over this. Because when Idi Amin took over, everybody thought it would be wonderful. Milton Obote, having gone off to a Commonwealth conference, enormous mistake to make, came back home and found, Idi Amin had changed the locks and was in the desk. And everybody in Britain said, this is a wonderful thing. Milton Obote, an appalling lefty, and Idi Amin's a good chap, was a sergeant in the King's African Rifles, and just the sort of bloke we want. And I knew a bit about Central Africa, because I'd spent some time there, and I thought, no, he isn't. He's around the twist. And I started writing these bulletins every week, simply because Amin had thrown out the press, and nobody had any correspondence.
Can you give me one?
No, I can't. No, I don't do black.
Alan, just very quickly. Who's your favourite target today? Maggie Thatcher?
No, I should think probably Ronald Reagan. I mean, Reagan, the awful thing about Reagan is he's actually gone over the top. He embodies his own joke, so it's very difficult to satirise him. Carter was fine, I mean, I did letters from Ms. Lillian Carter for a year while Carter was in office. Carter was fine because he wasn't quite that much of a joke. He only became a joke in the last year. Reagan has come in and all the jokes were made before he got there. But
he's a caricature of himself.
yes, but everybody around him, Haig and Caspar Weinberg and that appalling bagage of old writers that hobble around Pennsylvania Avenue, they're our prime targets because, after all, we are, like you, I suppose, an American dependency, and what happens in America, certainly at the top, is rather more significant than what happens in England at the top.
There's something. My brothers regard me as the wild colonial boy.
They really?
Yes. But
I've got a stronger Scots accent than they have.
Well, I keep it professionally. But one day, maybe if I'm famous enough, I might get my throat cut and punched. Thank you, Alan Coren.
Thank you.
There's a guy with a rapier wit, Alan Coren. He's written a couple of books. Forget what they were at the moment. I loved his description of the appalling garbage of old rightists who hang around Pennsylvania Avenue. And of course, every country needs a man like Coren and a magazine like Punch, and unfortunately, I don't think we have one at all. Haven't really had time to chat or to take calls on the British trip. No, it was great fun. It was quite a little while ago now, but I was very pleased with the performance of the brothers, although we did get a little bit nostalgic. Drew is 60 next year. I'm 63, and Sandy, who looks the youngest of all, is 66. Later in the morning, we're going to have Crispo in for a comment. But in the meanwhile, I'm going to take phone calls, free for all. But if you want to concentrate on the British trip, what it cost us, this and that and the next thing, I've got some stories to tell about it too after the break. The reason I asked my brothers the question about the snob system in Britain, the class system, which one normally doesn't meet, or when one does meet them, they're very gracious and polite and friendly, is that we ran into one real stinker. And I must say this was in Scotland. We'd been wined and dined and treated very handsomely, and we appeared at a certain old castle where the guy said to me, "Done anything in Perthshire?" And I said, "No, I haven't. Why should I?" "Oh," he said, "because that's where I live." I said, "No, but we've had a wonderful time in the rest of Scotland, and especially with the Lord Provost of Glasgow, who treated us just immensely well and made our whole trip set us off on a good journey." And this man, who shall not be identified any further than that, turned on me and said, I can't tell you what he said, but he insulted our hosts in Glasgow and throughout Scotland. So we had a tiny contretemps, and I cancelled any plans I had to put the chap on the air, not because I don't like interviewing nasty people, but because I would have lost my temper and clouted him. But that was really the only unfortunate incident we had. Otherwise, we had a terrific time. We stayed in a little hotel on Basil Street in Knightsbridge in London. One of these places, you know, it's not fancy North American. You go in and you think, oh, I don't know. And after you've been there a day, you realize you are in a very good hotel. Small, intimate, room service, chambermaids, the lot. And I suppose by British standards it wasn't that expensive. It was £45, which was $145.90, say $120 a night for each of 4 rooms, the crew with me, for bed and breakfast. The bill at the end of the 4 days was quite a culture shock, but it went very well. And British Tourist Authority supplied some of the facilities, much of the facilities, and British Air took us over and back. So we've no complaints really to make about it. I couldn't do the hotly topical stuff because we were filming early in the summer. Didn't go to Northern Ireland because I didn't want to go to Northern Ireland. My days of traipsing around asking awkward questions in places like that, I think, are somewhat in the background for me. Not that I'm admitting any age, but the Northern Ireland situation, as one found as I talked to many VIPs in the United Kingdom, is at this particular moment quite insoluble. And there doesn't seem to be any way at all to solve that problem. There must be some form of all Ireland at some time within the defence orbit of the United Kingdom. Sanity must eventually return, And there must be equality in everything between Northern Ireland and the area of the Free State. But discussing the Irish question merely takes one round and round in extraordinary circles. It's the saddest thing. One thing that really I learned for the first time over there by watching the television news, that was all, was that the night I was there, 45 expensive, one of the nights I stayed in London sometime after the crew came back, and our factory had been burned down, and 40-some diesel trucks worth £40,000 apiece had been fired. And the television reporter threw in just as a straightforward comment that it's impossible to get insurance in Northern Ireland, but that the British taxpayer would refund the owner of the plant for the value of all the stuff burned in that arson attack in Belfast that night. Very sad indeed, the whole business. But it's quite, in my view, incapable of any short-term solutions. The race troubles, I'm inclined to disagree with my brothers slightly on that. Drew, of course, who is a professional Democrat and means it, is totally in support of Margaret Thatcher with her aims for a multiracial society. And unemployment in Glasgow is 16%, but unemployment in these pockets of misery, you might say, in certain parts of London, which you don't normally see if you're doing the tourist bit, does, there's no doubt about it, contain an element, unfortunately, of racism. I've got some stuff I'm going to slip in at later dates, the lighter stuff, although I have an interview with the Commissioner of New Scotland Yard, Sir David McNee, which I'll use in an appropriate time when it becomes topical again. What else? What else? Oh, I've got lots of stories to tell. Will I take some calls? Yes. I haven't had a free-for-all for a long while. Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yes, I've got a different angle to show you on England. I'm a student, and I was living in England from January until June, and I was working there. I got a job within 3 days. I had a dual nationality, and I got a job at Selfridges in London. And you were talking about the racial troubles and things. Well, it's not really racial because I'm white, but when I got there for about the first month or so, I was given unheard of troubles from staff, basically because I was not a Brit. They really, every dirty job they could possibly think of, they'd ship it off to me, and they really didn't respect anything or anyone that was not British. All the black people in there working all had the porter's jobs and everything, and they were really looked down on.
Maybe it was your personality.
No, after about a month, once they got to know me, everything was fine, and went to the pub every day and everything. There was no trouble. But right at first, when I was sort of first introduced, I got the real cold shoulder.
Well, maybe you can't castigate a nation for that. How much money were you making?
£70 a week, and I was paying £5.50 a day in transportation. I was living in High Wycombe, though, so it was a long travel every day.
Well, you managed fine on £70 a week.
Pardon me?
You managed on £70 a week.
No, I didn't, because food during the day and rent, I was putting out about £85 a week just on bare necessities, because I was also studying there as well in the night.
I trust you enjoyed your experience.
Oh, it was fantastic. It really was. But that was the one thing that I never really expected to find so much trouble with the black people. And they were really all sort of stayed together. I don't know if you noticed that when you were back there, but they really seemed...
Well, they tend to do that anywhere they go, including the Scotch. Go ahead, please.
Hello?
That's you.
Jack.
Go ahead.
It's Stevie, your old friend from the Court Registry.
Hello, Stevie.
Yeah. I just wanted to talk about your nostalgic trip to Scotland.
Well, just keep going, Stevie.
Here's a point of interest.
Right.
A very good friend of mine married a girl who used to live around where you lived.
Uh-huh.
She's of Coventry.
Uh-huh.
And she told me if I ever contacted you to see if you remember the old Weir's factory.
My father was the production superintendent of Weir's factory.
There when it was made into a munitions factory. He was an inspector there.
Well, he must have known Willie Webster.
Yeah.
Because Willie was the best-known character on the Clyde, being the man that put all the pumps in all the big battleships.
Yeah, she was also in the Women's Police Corps. She lived at 7 Rannon Road.
I know the road. I delivered milk there, but I don't remember the name. What was the name?
Coventry.
Look, I'll be around today. I'll chat to you about it, Stevie.
Around today?
Aye.
I'm in Richmond here.
Oh, it's Stevie.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness gracious me, Stevie. And of course, you're still working.
No, heavens no. I'm retired.
Isn't this great? I remember the other Stevie in the registry, but you're the original Stevie.
I'm the original Stevie.
Stevie used to give me all the help that he could possibly give me when I was covering the courts in Vancouver for many, many years. Stevie, leave your number with Gladys, will you?
Okay.
Call you back.
All right.
Right. Go ahead, please. Hello.
Hello. Jock, I just called to let you know
Uh-huh.
that I agree with your brothers that England has a great future and it's a great country.
Here, good for you. Go ahead from Penticton. Hello, from Penticton.
Jack?
Yeah.
Yes, I'd like to compliment you on your program today. I'm off work sick, and first I've watched it in months, and it's fantastic. I really enjoyed your brothers, and I just compliment you on your show.
As long as it doesn't make you any sicker.
Fine, thank you, Jack.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
A break and more phone calls after the break. The costs in Britain weren't all that bad, and you know, it's quite amazing. The country has such an air of prosperity in the normal manners, and you don't see anything of the riots or the troubles in your normal travel. You go from London to Glasgow, Glasgow to London by train, and the service is terrific. I mean, and the trains go like the hammers of hell. And a meal for four costs about £35. A couple of drinks, no wine, maybe 3 or 4 drinks at the table, no wine, and it still costs you £35. Quite incredible the way the prices are. Of course, you don't have to sit down and have lunch, you know. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Jack.
Morning.
First, let me say thanks for having you on television.
Good.
And I'd have 2 questions, and I would appreciate if you maybe answer them, and I'd like to listen to it on the TV then and turn it up.
Right.
Number 1, where does it say anywhere that we all must make X% on our dollars year after year after year? In fact, book it in advance so we're sure of it. And secondly, what would happen, Jack, if everybody, I mean, we're a country known for strikes, if everybody would say, all right, as of today, we are not going to pay any more mortgage payments. And I mean everybody. What would happen?
Okay, go and listen. If everybody in trouble today said we are not going to make any more mortgage payments, those legitimate people who are in a bind would probably be treated with some caution and delicacy by any particular government that's in Ottawa. In fact, Paul Cosgrove said yesterday, beyond what Trudeau said, that nobody, in effect, would be thrown out of their house because of a foreclosure on the mortgage, and quite frankly, I don't accept that. But the inquiries I've made in the last few weeks since I've been back at work, it's quite obvious, although there is considerable and genuine panic over the doubling of mortgage payments for many people, that those in charge of foreclosures are being very gentle and delicate and discreet indeed. There is no sign yet, and I've checked court records as well as lawyers, that those who are in a position to take away a house are going forward with both feet. If that situation did develop in some incredible manner, there would be some kind of temporary mortgage moratorium. I don't think there's any doubt about that. The question and interest I can't possibly answer. The thing that worries me just at the moment is that Canada savings bonds are guaranteeing 19.5% for the next year, and people who have money can buy up to what I think is a limit of $10,000 per person in the family. And when Canada savings bonds goes into the market at 19.5%, somebody up there is convinced that 19.5%, while is only going to be a competitive rate with other interest rates being offered to depositors in this country. And the difference between here and Britain on this question of cash flow and available cash is that I think our standards are that much more flexible and better that quite a lot of people, organized people and 2-income families, are in the position of taking the benefit of the 19.5% guaranteed interest of the 20 point from this trust company or that trust company. And we don't have quite the same desperate pressure as there is in the UK, where you'd find the average working man really hasn't got a bean in his pocket and spends to the total limit of his income. I think that's true. And I learned from my contacts too, and it's happening here now, that you want something done in Britain, you pay cash money. I'm talking about fixing your plumbing or putting a new bit of roof on or a new bit of wall or something done. The only way to get it done quickly and efficiently is agree to pay it in cash without tax going to the workman who did the job. And that's a sign of a pretty sick society. We are moving in that direction. There's no doubt in my mind. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Jack. I'm enjoying your program immensely. Takes us back all to the old days of Mary Hill Barracks and Sauchiehall Street and all the places that we both know. Now you're going to have old Clark on. According to the morning paper, you're going to have old Clark on Friday morning.
Right.
I want you to, if you can, be like a new bridegroom and be gentle with him. Because when you're talking about rapier wit, you've got the best of rapiers.
No, how can I be gentle with them? If Joe Clark appears here on Friday morning and I say, good morning, Mr. Clark, how are you, Mr. Clark? What will you please do if you take power in the next election, whenever it is, to help the hard-pressed mortgage holders? He'll say, I'll give you mortgage deduction. Now, I know the answer to those questions. The one subject which I must start with, Clark, is quite straightforward.
I know you will.
How many knives are in your back? Does it only hurt when you laugh? Why did you demote Crosby? Why did you apparently demote, what's her name, Flora MacDonald? You know, obviously he's drawing the wagons into a circle to tell all Mulroney and Crosby and Crombie, look, if you're going to try and remove me with your eastern pressure out of Montreal and Toronto, there's going to be a bloodbath and the Conservative Party will not be in a fit condition and you will give the Liberals an instant chance, first time they can, to call an election when the Tories are leaderless. That's what Joe Clark faces, and that's the topic. I'll start with Joe Clark on Friday morning.
I'm beginning to feel sorry for him already.
Oh, don't be silly. I am never rude. I'm fairly direct. Thanks very much, old boy. Much obliged. Take a break. One more segment. I don't know whoever invented half glasses, but they're useless. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Jack?
Yeah.
Yeah, a little shocked by the philosophy saying that delicate and discreet, quote, on foreclosing on mortgages.
Yeah, no, the rush has not yet appeared, and I suspect they'll be damn careful.
Yeah, but isn't the end result the same, whether they're delicate and discreet and putting icing on it and everything else, but when the butchery's still the same?
Well, and it'll be worse than that, because very nice lenders will capitalize the overdue interest and put it on your mortgage, and they'll tell you, well, hopefully down the road a little bit, interest rates will drop to something more reasonable. But even if they drop to 15%, they're exorbitant and usurious from the point of the person paying the mortgage.
And does delicacy and discreet make any difference?
No, it keeps the heat off politically, you nit.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Of course, that's why they'll do it that way. There won't be any rush of lawyers down to the courthouses to slap mortgages and sell houses. And furthermore, there's a very practical thing involved. It's damn difficult to sell houses, and a lot of the mortgage lenders will be thinking, we don't want the house until the market happens. Upwards.
Well, I raised 6 kids, and I've got a daughter getting married next month, and I feel sorry for these young people trying to start a home and a family and everything that we used to do. I think the fabric of society and being delicate and discreet doesn't change that ugliness.
It'll eventually come to the stage on the pressure of population where they'll do what they did in Britain and Sweden and slap up the concrete block houses with living units in them. That'll come to that in due course.
I'm afraid you're right.
What do you mean I'm afraid I'm right? I know I'm right. What would have happened in Britain if they hadn't done that? they would have had riots in the streets.
Aye.
You go from Glasgow to Edinburgh and you'll see a line of barrack blocks which are clean, livable and everything else. But they're not what you, the affluent Canadian, expecting everything to be as affluent for your kids as you want. Be practical, man.
I know.
Okay, bye. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, good morning.
Yeah.
Glad to see you back, Jack.
I'm kind of glad to be back, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, well, I've been listening to you since you opened up, and you've gone through some nostalgia. I can't pronounce it as well as you can. The funny thing about it, Jack, is we're moving, and we went through some old trunks, and we come by a paper that was made in 1944, January the 10th, 1944. And there's an edition there about Mr. John W. Dafoe, noted Winnipeg editor. I was wondering if you knew him.
No, never met him, knew of him, a famous, great Canadian editor from Winnipeg who's got some relatives doing odd jobs in newspapers in Vancouver now. The word is nostalgia, but nostalgia sounds just as good. Doesn't it? Sure it does.
Hello?
Yeah.
Are you speaking to me?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh. I agree with you on your mortgages.
Mm-hmm. Okay, agree some more.
On the mortgages and the Canada bonds, somebody up there knows how long those interest rates are going to stay. And also the price differences in Britain. You're saying that, you know, there are higher prices there and yet the wages are lower. But the thing is that they're going to make us like Britain and Europe. Trudeau's saying we shouldn't cry because our gas is going to be $4 in so many years. But the thing is, do we want to be like Europe? We came here to Canada and America to be better, to make our children better. And you're talking about the class system. That's what builds class system when you have no hope of improving or your children improving.
Very good point, ma'am. Cigarettes are £1 a packet in Britain when I was there, 92p a packet, so therefore a lot of people are finally cutting down smoking. Alcohol, which I never touch, is dearer there than it is here, believe you me. And there is, I'm not saying they make smaller wages in Britain today, but they spend even more of every nickel, I suspect, than is spent in this country. On the very straightforward philosophy, it's going to be dearer tomorrow, it's going to cost more tomorrow, spend it all today. People are doing it in this country too, but not quite. I don't think you can only gauge this
But
to the
they're
same
rioting
extent.
in the streets. And the thing is that when you have nothing to lose, I mean, you have nothing. And
Yeah.
therefore, why not go out and riot?
Yeah, but when you look
You
at
have
this,
nothing, you're going to get back at the people that...
it's not likely we're going to have riots in the streets because of the fact that we have a very solidly socialized social system. And while there are mutterings, reasonable mutterings and grumblings at the lower end, especially for the old age pensioners without additional income, and for the life of me, said Webster, I can't understand, just to be local for a moment, why Grace McCarthy had to come out and say she's going to make all the able-bodied unemployed go on a monthly revision. She could have done that perfectly well without, and nobody wants able-bodied unemployed if there are jobs available that pay them more on welfare to sit about in their butts. She could have done and achieved the same thing, surely with the number of civil servants she's got now, by reviewing every single case on the books and not causing panic. How a woman with a 6-month-old child is regarded as, is it under or over 6 months they're regarded as able-bodied unemployed?
Yeah, well, it's 6...
Doesn't make any sense to me at all.
They can stay at home, and if they
Oh,
have
yeah, it's
two
over
under
6
12.
months.
But I agree with you there that she's made a stupid mistake. But you look in the paper, and there's mechanics, welders, fitters, all the trades. They're desperate for them. And you mentioned...
Well, that's one of the other faults in our country. Our system of apprenticeship has been throttled in many ways, not only by bureaucracies, but the effects of the trade unions, who will not allow certain apprenticeship courses to be filled to the full when there is unemployment in that particular trade. I think the unions have got to be taken right out of the control of the apprenticeship and any other skilled union classifications.
Is that why we couldn't import or immigrate from Britain? You mentioned to your brothers about 50
Very
had
difficult.
to have to come here, and yet the Asians seem to get in here so easy with no trade.
They are much tighter family units who are able under the reunification plan to bring in many more people. If you want to talk ethnic politics, you might say, the average British family isn't all that close that they all want to be in the same country. They tend to go their own ways as family units, where in the Asian family or the Chinese family, the family solidarity is tight, and they can take the fullest advantage of the reunification policies and bring in many members of their immediate family. The British don't do that because they're more individualists and not so tightly bound in one family compact. And look at our family. I get on fine with my brothers for 2 or 3 days, and we've exhausted conversation. I'll see them 5 years from now, and we'll all be happy. Or next year, if you bump into them in the street, it's great fun. Nostalgia. But none of us would want to live in the same town as the other.
No, that's the way I feel too.
How about your family?
My family's back in Toronto, and I go back for a visit, and that's great, and have fun, and so on and so forth, but I certainly wouldn't want to be there every day.
Thanks very much. Trail BC, go ahead.
Hello.
That's you.
No, this is Fruitvale, not Trail.
Oh, you phoned yesterday?
That's right. I was pretty mad, but I'm going to go right to the question today. You didn't know where I was from. What happened to Trudeau's plan for double tracking our road, main line, all the way to Vancouver? This is one question.
The Liberal government would tell you that the double tracking is proceeding as fast as the CN can do it.
And the other is, from Trail to Kimberley, we have best tracking system there is, because Cominco has their mine in Kimberley.
Now, what do you want? A rapid transit between Trail and Kimberley?
No, we want some transportation out of the Castlegar area, or the Trail area. You see, for us to get to the main line here, we have to drive to Revelstoke. And all our freight goes from,
There's no point in taking that up. It's purely a matter of economics for the railway. If the railway found that line paid, they put it in, and if it didn't, they won't. Simple as that. One more call. Go ahead, please.
Hello, Mr. Webster.
Yes, ma'am.
My God, thank God I'm not hanging by my neck waiting for you. By the way, I'd like to say thank you very much. I adored what you said, bringing your family into this. I'm from Scotland, too. I'm from Dumfries.
No kidding.
Hello?
I said, of course you are.
Yes, and I love that. Close the coattails feather. I understand that. And I just love you. I think you're fantastic. I'd like to talk a whole long time, and I can't.
Have you got any money?
Webster?
That's a joke. Look, thanks very much for your call. I'll finish this on that very pleasant note. But I don't like to be too ethnic all the time, you know.
Mr. Webster?
Yes? Yes?
I, like you, do not tolerate fools gladly.
Here, here.
And can I say one thing before I leave?
Uh-huh.
Run me, you lumbrick.
That's Polish.
Eh?
That's Polish, and thanks very much. What's next? What's the time? Oh. Just a minute. I'm deciding what I'm going to say. I will not take direction this morning. Now you can take a break.
Got the charm. I mean, he's irascible, but with charm.
Nor is he, but
So 30 altogether.
you get the chance to come off.
20 from the top.
You think some of it could rub off?
Yeah.
Okay. And remember, and now Chevron Simon Fraser. I had lunch with Ben McDonald.
Oh, we plugged Chevron again.
Yeah.
John Crispo's back again. Crispo is the SFU visiting professor. Brilliant character, quite knowledgeable. But before he opens his mouth this morning, you may smile, he's going to see a streeter done by my intrepid Steve Wyatt on the subject of should Joe Clark quit or get the hell out or stay.
There's too much rumbling in the party. I think they should keep their mouth shut and run hard, and beat Trudeau.
I feel as far as a leader, he's useless. And his own party's got a division in his own party, so I feel that in light of that, he should have quit a long time ago.
I think Clark should stay in. I think he did a very good job of representing the West, and stay with Clark.
I think he should quit.
Quit? How come?
Well, he really hasn't done much. And give someone else a chance.
There's been enough dissension within the party, and if they could pull themselves together, why disrupt things right now?
Most of the people within and without the party seem to have some doubts about his leadership capabilities, and I think the recent convention indicated that at least a third of them are anxious for a leadership review, so I don't think that he has much of a chance to be Prime Minister again, so I think the Conservatives have to have a new leader.
I would suggest that if the Liberals lose Trudeau, that Clark would have an excellent chance of a landslide.
Time for him to leave.
Time to leave?
Oh,
How
yeah.
come?
Well, I think he could really win the last time, and I think we need a new man in there.
Well, I'd like to see a more dynamic person in charge of the Conservative Party. I approve of Joe Clark personally, but I think the problem is to get some people to vote for him. I don't think he's positive enough in some directions, you know.
I'm not too fond of him.
Like to see him go?
Well, yes, I've been a Liberal all my time.
A Liberal in the West?
Right from Saskatoon.
I'd like to see somebody with a lot of forthright, like Lockheed or somebody like that. Yeah.
He should be Prime Minister to start off with. I think that Canadians made a very bad mistake in pushing the party out, and they've got what they deserve.
I think he should stay. Go. Go. How about you?
Stay.
Go.
Go.
I think he should stay.
I believe he should go.
I don't know.
Do you care?
No, not really.
I think he should go. Should stay.
Stay?
Yes.
Well, John Crispo, that came out fairly even. I think if you include the Liberal, Clark should go, had a slight edge.
I'm surprised.
Mind you, you can't call that any kind of poll with veracity or real credibility. It's only a selection of, in all we did, about 20 people.
Right, right. Well, you see, I start with the fundamental premise that what this country desperately needs right now is a credible opposition party. And I don't think we've got one. You know, everything's down for the Liberals. They're in trouble on every front. But
answer the question first, though, John.
Should he go?
Should he go?
Yes. Yes, I feel much more strongly than the people you interviewed, and I don't quarrel with what they said. That's apparently the view. I did a little informal survey of my own out at Simon Fraser yesterday. It was 6-3 against him. But I wouldn't vouch for that. It gives me more comfort than what I just heard there. Let me start, though, by saying I'm not down on Joe Clark, the person. I don't want to say he's a nice guy. That's the worst thing you can say about anybody. But he's a decent, good guy. I've had a couple of private encounters with him. I've been impressed with him. There's a lot of substance there. Look, he came out from the wilderness and took over that party. He became Prime Minister. He blew it after that. But I think what I'm most indebted to him for, and I'm indebted to him, because he stopped Trudeau in the Constitution. If it hadn't been for Joe Clark, it had been in Westminster by now, they probably would have dumped all over us with us. So we owe him a lot, and I don't want to denigrate him in any way, shape, or form in any of those respects. But I come back to what I said. We desperately need an alternative in this country, a credible alternative. The people are fed up with Trudeau, and yet they still aren't moving over because they've got too many doubts about, I believe, the leader of the party. And he can't unite the party right now. I mean, what he's done to Crosby, to me, is personally kind of the last straw. I'm not a Tory, I'm not anything. But that guy Crosby, a bit of a buffoon at times, but a very effective critic in the finance portfolio. And nobody, and then Michael Wilson's a sound guy, doing a good job in energy. Why'd he move him? Michael just hasn't got the pizzazz. He can't do the job, I don't think, as a financial critic that Crosby was doing.
Okay,
so I'm disturbed.
Okay, Crosby, a bit of a buffoon, you say.
Well, publicly, he looks that way. A lot of substance, the man. I've said to you before, I have a lot of faith in the man.
But we only judge people in this country by their public appearance.
That's Joe's problem. His public appearance is not what it needs to be to become Prime Minister. It's too bad.
Interpret for me Clark's shadow cabinet shuffle and point out to me where he has deliberately downgraded people who might be a threat to him, apart from Crosby.
Well, it's Crosby and it's really Flora MacDonald, although I don't perceive her being that big a threat. I guess sort of neutral on Crombie, the tiny perfect mayor. But most of it, I think, is directed at Crosby.
What's Crombie's position in the shadow cabinet now?
Oh, what did he get up to? Did he get environment? Or labor? Did he get labor? I think he got labor, which is minor for him.
Of course, one of the strong MPs in the West Coast, John Fraser, really hasn't done anything in the shadow cabinet and is obviously not regarded by Clark as a major supporter.
No, but he's not regarded as a threat at this point either, as far as I can make out. I'd say he looks at him rather on a rather neutral basis. It's really aimed at Crosby and to a lesser extent Flora MacDonald.
But the fact remains, surely in your view, John Crispo, that Clark's action last week in doing this was, from his point of view, a good action?
From his point of view? Well, look, he personally, would I stand down in his position? Would you? There's a lot of ego involved in those jobs, and to step aside is a very statesmanlike act. I'm not saying I would have done it, but I think he should have done it. So,
step aside?
Step aside. I think it'd be better for the party and for the country.
Is it not worse for the Conservative Party to go through another bloodbath as they went through with Diefenbaker?
But that's now the risk. They may well go through a bloodbath. I mean, will the Crosbys, will the others roll over and play dead? Will the Toronto group lie down? I mean, the Toronto group knows they like winners, and they don't think they've got one there. There's a greater risk of a bloodbath with Clark hanging in than with him stepping aside. Now, he could have stepped aside and said, I'm running again. And that would have been a Donnybrook. And maybe again a bloodbath. And I don't want to see a bloodbath, but I think hanging in is more likely to lead to a bloodbath.
As I remember the constitution of the Conservative Party, when it comes up for the annual review, it's Joe Clark who decides whether or not the leadership matter will be on the convention floor. Is that not correct?
That's right, and he has said it will not be on the floor. And he's told his caucus it will not be debated in this caucus. But I don't care what he says, if in the background there's a lot of discontent and a lot of misgivings, that gets expressed. You can't keep it down.
Would you describe this as a Clark goof, coming out front and center now and saying, look, Crosby, you're downgraded. Flora, you're shifted aside.
Well,
Michael Wilson, you're coming up.
The biggest goof to me is hanging in. The second part of the goof is downgrading Crosby. The third is Flora. I got nothing against Michael. I just wouldn't have moved him up at the expense of Crosby.
Kind of guy, if they phone up and they want you to interview somebody like Michael Wilson, you say, well, we're kind of busy that morning.
Yeah.
You know, that's the kind of thing we have.
Yeah. Well, he very sound of mind, but again, he hasn't got the public presence. Crosby has it.
Webster, Crispo, and calls to Crispo and Webster after the break. Takes your time to get. John Crispo from SFU. You do regard this move by Clark, but you can't call it a goof, the goof of the week, or any kind of goof at all. If Clark makes a positive step to stay in there, you're saying that his goof is merely because he's had guts and courage enough to say, I'm not going to have my throat cut by Crosby. I know that he knows that Crosby ain't all that popular in the East or in Newfoundland or the Maritimes. I'm not going to let Crombie build up a machine in Toronto that's going to cut my throat. I'm not going to make space anywhere for Brian Mulroney to come in and sit in the House of Commons to challenge me if I put on a liberal review, a leadership review. I think that Clark deserves a pat on the back for being a conservative who came out and said, you want me? Cut my throat in public.
Oh, no. Gutsy,
you don't want me.
Gutsy, yes. I mean, he took the leadership from nowhere. I said that earlier. And it is personally gutsy to hang in now when he's got a lot of people...
It's your personal opinion that it's the wrong decision, not for Clark, but for the Conservative Party.
It may turn out to be the wrong decision for Clark himself, because if there is a bloodbath and there is a vendetta and there is a real breakdown in the whole party, he'll suffer for it too. I'm saying if he'd thought about the party and the country, I think he might have made another decision. He would have made another decision.
Come on.
I wouldn't have done it, perhaps.
Even Neville Chamberlain didn't get to that stage.
All right, I'm asking for more statesmanship than you...
House of Commons, in the name of God, go.
I am asking for more statesmanlike behavior than you're saying anybody's capable of.
Well, am I more cynical than you?
It'd be close.
Yeah. I'll take some calls on this. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning.
Go after Crispo. Don't go after me. Go ahead.
Mr. Crispo, you're one of the few people I have ever heard that I agree with totally.
Oh, dear, you should worry. You better see somebody.
I do have a question. You've been talking about liberals and conservatives, but my question is, what about the NDP right now? I think a lot of people are totally with the stance that Mr. Broadbent's taken.
Totally what?
They're with him?
No, I think, especially after the constitutional question.
Wait a minute. On the Constitution, he's been in bed with Trudeau all along, and at the risk of his own party, he's alienated Blakeney, Romano, the more sensible wing of the NDP, especially in the West. Don't ask me to endorse him right now. I think he's gone off the deep end. I mean, he's party to a constitution that's going to embed and enshrine the appointed Senate of Canada forever with the veto power to stop constitutional change in this country. How can a party that has long advocated the abolition of the Senate now go along with a constitutional change that gives it veto power over future change? I can't believe it.
Yeah, well, that was mainly my question. And second question, what should we do with the Senate?
What should we do with the Senate? Well, I used to think we should abolish it because I didn't think we could ever reform it, and there's a bit of that still in me, but I've come to the conclusion that we should turn it into something like a House of the Provinces. It should be a body elected, or I'd contemplate all sorts of things. Perhaps it should be more representative of the regions in the country. Perhaps half of the people from BC should be appointed by the federal government, half by the BC government, or perhaps it should be elected. I'd look at a variety of things as long as it becomes an articulate spokesman for regional interests across this country at the center. It's part of the challenge of federalizing. Note that I used the word federalizing Ottawa, not centralizing, but federalizing Ottawa.
Should Broadbent go too?
Oh, I'm not ready to say that. I mean, Bob Ray doesn't even think he's going to go, or he would have hung in. I'm mad at Broadbent.
I think a lot of people are.
Well, no, there's a lot of decency in the man, but on the Constitution, on energy, and now he's misleading the people on interest rates now. He's really suggesting we can cut interest rates and control the flow of dollars between countries, and it's quite misleading to promise these things. You can't do them.
Can I have one last question?
Mm-hmm.
What about the NDP stand on NATO?
Well, I don't know what the NDP stand on NATO is. It waffles from time to time.
Get rid of it.
No, last time they waffled. During the election they said, well, we're not sure we should get out. I think they're lukewarm about it.
Gutless.
Well, you can call it gutless.
Well, they're just the same as the Liberals.
Well, I'm
and
not.
Trudeau.
No. Well, Trudeau personally, but not a lot of Liberals. But I'm very strong on NATO. I believe strongly in the Western Alliance. I'm a bad guy because I don't trust the Russians. So
Crispo,
anything I say is suspect.
Crispo loves the neutron bomb.
Agreed.
No. You want to get onto that one day? We'll talk about what they should have done in Europe.
Love to.
Bye.
Bye.
That was the bomb. Go ahead, please. Touch wood. It was a joke. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, good morning. You seem to be saying that he pushed Crosby back because Crosby was a threat to the leadership. I thought he took him out of finance because of Crosby's own financial problems in Newfoundland, where Avalon was liquidated. They owed the Bank of Commerce over $500,000.
Is that not an old story?
Well, it's written up in Maclean's September the 7th. I don't think it's so old.
Well,
they were thrust into bankruptcy on account of that ship where the Royal Bank had $7.2 million and a $5 million mortgage on a $5.4 million asset.
Well, how do you get inside the mind of a man? I'm doing it. My view is that he moved Crosby over because he perceived him as a threat.
Yeah, I think that Crosby too had lost his credibility for Clark. With this kind of flack out in the background.
No, I think if he lost credibility, it was over his budget that led to the defeat of the Clark government. If he wanted to rationalize moving Crosby over, it surely would have been on that basis, not on the basis of what's going on with Crosby Enterprises in Newfoundland.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you, ma'am. Well, Crisp with Crosby. Do another shot next week.
Great.
For a man from the Ivory Halls, you seem to have your feet mostly on the ground. You must be an iconoclast and an outcast.
Well, if you say much more, I'll no longer be acceptable in academia, so be careful.
I mean, because I happen to think you're quite bright? Do you want more than 6 hours a week? Don't have to answer that question
not
on the
today.
grounds it may tend to incriminate you.
Exactly.
Webster, after the break. Oh, you should know about it. If she puts it up, you should learn about it.
15 seconds to you, Jack. 15. You got 20 seconds to wrap.